Assalamu alaikum my dear students. Once again welcome to my YouTube channel by the name MS Lectures, and today I will be demonstrating you about the very important topic of the physiology, which is the extrinsic pathway and the intrinsic pathway. So I will be demonstrating you that when these two pathways are activated and what are the functions of these two pathways. So first of all, talking about the extrinsic pathway. This pathway is activated whenever there is any external factor, which means that any external factor when causes the rupture of the skin and the blood vessels, the extrinsic pathway is activated. So any rupture of blood vessel or skin that can cause bleeding. So at that time, what happens that the extrinsic pathway is activated. So what this extrinsic pathway do? So the function of this extrinsic pathway is to start the mechanism of the blood clotting in order to stop the body from suffering from the blood loss. So blood clotting mechanisms are activated. So what are the conditions when the extrinsic pathway are activated? So those conditions are in the case of trauma. So what happens in the case of trauma? Injury occurs which causes the rupture of the blood vessel or skin and extrinsic pathway is activated. Or in the case of any cut by the knife or any other factor. So these are the conditions when extrinsic pathway is activated. Now talking about the intrinsic pathway. So as the name suggests that this pathway is activated whenever there is the internal factor involved. There would be no external factor that would be involved in causing the blood clotting, because no rupture of the blood vessel is involved. The whole mechanism would be inside the blood, and the mechanism would be initiated inside the blood. So what happens that we will talk about the two conditions. First condition is when the blood is placed inside the test tube. So in the test tube, what happens that when you place the blood in the test tube, so coagulation process is activated. So process of the coagulation occurs. So this occurs by the activation of the intrinsic pathway. So this is the first condition. Second condition is the whenever the tuberculous bacteria, whenever the tuberculous bacteria enters in our bloodstream, it initiates the process of the blood clotting. So tuberculous bacteria when enters into the bloodstream, what happens that intrinsic pathway is activated, and this intrinsic pathway in turn starts the process of the blood clotting. So these are the two conditions whenever when the intrinsic pathway is activated within the blood. This mechanism occurs within the blood. Now talking about that what happens during the minor trauma. So we should keep this important point in our mind that during the minor trauma, what happens that the platelet plug is formed. So you must need to remember this point that during the minor trauma, platelet plug formation takes place in order to stop the body from suffering from blood loss. Now at the last, I will demonstrate you about that what are the 4 steps which you can say participate in causing the blood clotting process. So blood clotting process occurs through following 4 mechanisms. Number 1, the vasoconstriction occurs of blood. Vasoconstriction of blood vessel occurs. So first of all, whenever there is any injury, bleeding occurs. So first of all, vasoconstriction of the blood vessel occurs in order to stop the bleeding. Secondly, the temporary platelet plug formation occurs. Platelet plug formation occurs. Thirdly, the coagulation cascade is activated. All those factors which causes the coagulation are activated. And number 4, finally, the fibrin meshwork is formed. The fibrin clot is formed, which actually stops the process of the bleeding and saves us from the excessive blood loss. So in this way, in this particular lecture, I have explained you about the extrinsic pathway, what are the conditions when the extrinsic and intrinsic pathway are activated. Then I have told you about the minor trauma, and what happens during the minor trauma, platelet plug formation occurs, and what are those 4 steps which are involved in the blood clotting. So hope you have understood my lecture well. Last but not the least, don't forget to subscribe to my lectures. Thank you.